Hi folks, Lou here, and I'm going to talk a little more about robust games, which I have talked about in the past. And by robust game, I mean one that can be played and work pretty well, even if people manage to not understand or otherwise foul up some of the rules. But there's another aspect of this that I hadn't thought of, and this was brought to my attention by a comment somewhere, maybe on one of my videos, maybe somewhere else, by Rue Nacken, Nacken. I played a game of terraforming Mars for about 3 hours, where you have your entire state displayed with cubes on tracks, your victory points, your different currencies, your income levels, everything. One bump to the table completely destroyed that game, and everybody was so traumatized, we never played it physically again after that. Terraforming Mars is notorious with this. Board Game Geek forums are full of similar experiences. So people designed apps to track your state, made plastic overlays so your cubes slide into a grid, etc. Unquote. In other words, it's not robust physically. And yes, I've seen terraforming played without those trays where the cubes fit in, and I've seen them played with the trays where the cubes fit in, and that's the second way is certainly more robust. And the longer a game is, the more likely it is that something physical is going to go wrong. I remember telling Fantasy Flight Games for the second edition of Britannia that a victory point track just wasn't a good idea. Because in a highly competitive game that lasts 4 or 5 hours when played by experienced players, it was very likely that those tracks were going to get knocked out of kilter. So what Fantasy Flight did is include victory point tokens so that people got tokens instead of marking their score in some other way. The traditional way, by the way, if you don't know, is to have a score sheet and mark the scores on a score sheet. Concomitant of that was that unless you worked hard to track the scores of the other players, you didn't know what score they had, which made the game quite different. Because part of the game, part of understanding the system in Britannia, is knowing what scores particular nations are likely to get, because nations score at different rates. It's a highly, savagely asymmetric game. Every player has a completely different position to play. And so you've got to learn how those different asymmetries fit together. If you don't even know what they've scored, that makes it difficult to do that. Now, some people may prefer to play that way, but the experts who play in the tournaments at WBC and PresCon, I don't think they would want to play that way. I have only once seen somebody actually playing the game using those scoring chits. And those scoring chits, of course, are not in the PSE Games edition with the plastic pieces and so on. We didn't think it was worthwhile. Score sheets. Now, that brings up another point. People screw up when they score. In fact, at the tournaments nowadays, I discovered when I was looking through some old score sheets that the scores had been added up incorrectly, apparently, and that had changed who won the game. So I started to volunteer, because I don't play, I volunteered to check the score sheets, and we gradually made everybody aware that it was important because I found some big mistakes that made differences in who won or who was second and so on. You could say that's a fault in the sense of it is not as robust a game as it might be. Probably using the scoring chits is more robust, but it changes the game in other ways. So if you think about this, you can apply this to a lot of different games where physical problems, or problems we should say in more generally, that are not part of the actual gameplay, such as scoring, can be very important. And when you design a game, you want to make sure that it's sufficiently robust to not have these problems. Of course, if it's a computer game, the computer would do the scoring, the computer would keep track of everything, And unless the computer programming is screwed up, it's going to work better. So that's an advantage of electronic games over physical games. Thanks for listening.